12 Golden Rules to Negotiate Anything and Always Win. Introduction. Why we all negotiate daily and why you need to master it. From the moment we wake up each day, without even realizing it, we begin to negotiate. It's not just about boardroom meetings or sealing big business deals. It's also about the countless small interactions where interests, desires, and needs are exchanged. Imagine for a moment that you wake up late on a Monday morning. You glance at the clock and see that you have only 20 minutes to get to work. You grab your phone and call your boss to let them know you'll be late. In that call, you're not just stating a fact, you're also implicitly negotiating for their understanding and patience. The way you communicate, the tone of your voice, the explanation you give, and even your promise to make up for the lost time later are all part of a micro-negotiation that shapes how your sense of responsibility will be perceived. When people think of negotiation, many picture a sharp-dressed salesperson haggling over the price of a car, or an executive trying to close a multi-million-dollar merger. But negotiation also happens when a parent tries to get their child to eat vegetables, when a couple decides where to go on vacation, or when someone asks for a raise after a year of quiet hard work. Any interaction in which two or more parties have different interests but want to find common ground is a negotiation. Failing to master this skill is like walking blind in a world where almost everything depends on agreements. Consider how this directly affects your personal life. When you walk into a store and see an item with a fixed price, most people either pay it or leave. But there are those who manage to get discounts, extra benefits, or better payment terms. Why? Because they instinctively understand the basic principles of negotiation. And they don't just get better deals, they also strengthen their relationships because they know how to ask without offending, how to give in when necessary, and, most importantly, how to find solutions that benefit everyone involved. Now let's think about the workplace. One of the most critical moments in any career is salary negotiation. Some brilliant people, out of fear of conflict or lack of knowledge, accept the first offer without discussion. Others, armed with preparation and confidence, secure significant raises and benefits that drastically improve their quality of life. This kind of negotiation isn't just an exchange of numbers. It's the defense of your professional value and the recognition of your contribution. Knowing how to negotiate can mean a difference of thousands of dollars over the years, directly impacting your financial peace of mind, your self-esteem, and even your relationship with your work. The same principle applies to personal relationships. A couple, for example, won't always agree on everything. From simple decisions like which movie to watch on a Friday night, to more complex ones like buying a house or deciding on their children's education, everything involves negotiation. Couples who don't develop this skill often fall into patterns of imposition or avoidance, where one person always gives in and the other always wins, breeding silent resentment. In contrast, those who understand that negotiation is not about fighting but about finding solutions reach agreements where both feel heard. In this sense, negotiation is an act of love and mutual respect, a tool that strengthens bonds instead of weakening them. The problem is, many people approach negotiation with fear. They think only good talkers can do it well, or that it's a skill reserved for aggressive, calculating people. This is one of the most damaging myths, as it leads to inaction and settling for less. In reality, negotiation isn't about imposing your will or manipulating others. It's about honestly communicating your interests and finding solutions that work for everyone. When you truly understand this, fear is replaced by a strategic mindset, much like a chess player planning each move, not to defeat the other person, but to find the best possible outcome for both sides. Take, for example, someone who needs to buy a used car. Without basic negotiation skills, they'll likely accept the first price offered, trusting it's fair. But someone with a strategic mindset will research the vehicle's true value, compare market prices, spot weaknesses like high mileage or maintenance issues, and enter the conversation knowing exactly how much they're willing to pay and where they'll draw the line. They're not there to fight or beat the seller, but to reach a fair agreement that protects their interests. This simple preparation can mean substantial savings or much better purchase terms. Another everyday example. Someone who wants to change their work schedule to spend more time with their family. Instead of making demands or threatening to quit, a skilled negotiator builds a proposal showing how the change benefits both the employee and the company. Increased productivity, reduced stress, greater commitment. The conversation shifts from a potential conflict to a collaborative opportunity, leaving both sides satisfied. Successful negotiation doesn't mean always beating the other person. It means creating smart solutions where everyone feels they've gained something of value. You achieve this when you stop seeing negotiation as a fight or confrontation and start seeing it as a strategic tool, a way to build better results than you'd get by simply accepting what's offered. Starting today, you can begin to notice how every conversation is actually a micro-negotiation, from asking a waiter to swap an ingredient in your dish, to persuading your work team to adopt your proposal. With the right mindset, every interaction becomes an opportunity to improve your life and the lives of those around you. The key is to leave fear behind and replace it with a clear strategy. Because, at its core, negotiation is less about confrontation and more about the art of building bridges, resolving differences, and opening new possibilities. But before we continue, write in the comments which city you're listening from. And if this message is resonating with you, subscribe to the channel now. That way, you won't miss any content that feeds your mind and brings you closer each day to the life you truly deserve. There's no time to waste. Now, let's continue. Rule number 1. Prepare more than you think you need. When most people think about negotiating, they picture the actual conversation, the face-to-face moment when arguments are exchanged, offers are made, and responses are awaited. However, the true success of a negotiation is rarely decided in that instant. It's determined long before, in the preparation phase. Entering a negotiation without proper preparation exposes you to chance, to improvisation, and in most cases, leads to accepting less than you deserve or committing to more than you can give. Preparation is that silent, invisible work that ultimately decides the visible outcome. Imagine for a moment that you're invited to play a chess match against an experienced player. If you show up without knowing their strategies, without studying openings, and without anticipating moves, you'll depend entirely on luck and impulse, and you'll almost certainly lose. Now think of replacing that chessboard with a salary negotiation, a property purchase, a contract's terms, or even the schedule that determines how you care for your family. If you walk in without information, without a structured plan, and without clarity on your limits and aspirations, your position will be as fragile as someone playing blindfolded. Preparation starts with a simple question. What do I really want to achieve? Although it may seem obvious, many people never take the time to clearly define their exact goal before negotiating. For example, suppose you want to ask for a raise. If your goal is simply to earn more money, that's vague and unstrategic. How much more exactly? What specific number would represent fair progress for you? What other benefits, aside from money, would you be willing to consider? More vacation days, a flexible schedule, or company-funded training? Having clarity on your primary goal and your secondary options allows you to navigate flexibly and prevents you from feeling cornered when the other party makes an unexpected offer. The second step in preparation is researching the other party. Not just the obvious facts, but the hidden drivers behind their decisions. This means understanding their interests, which is very different from their positions. For example, in the sale of a house, a seller's position might be, I want $150,000 for this property. But their true interest might be to move quickly for a new job opportunity or to get out from under a heavy mortgage. If you focus only on their position, you'll limit the discussion to price. But if you understand their interest, you can propose alternative solutions. A faster closing, covering some of their closing costs, or offering a slightly lower price with conditions that make their life easier. This level of insight only comes from investigating, asking questions, and listening carefully, even before you formally sit down to negotiate. Research isn't just glancing at a social media profile or reading a couple of online articles. It's about spotting patterns, history, and signals. For instance, if you're negotiating with a supplier, find out who their main clients are, their position in the market, and whether they're in a growth phase or facing challenges. Every piece of information can shift your approach. If you discover they're losing market share, their interest might be securing long-term clients, and you can use that to negotiate better terms like additional discounts or more personalized support. On the other hand, if they're at capacity with high demand, you'll need a stronger argument to convince them to prioritize you. Another crucial part of preparation is setting your walkaway point, the limit beyond which you'd rather leave the table than accept the deal. Many people fail here because they approach negotiations with a "let's see what happens" attitude or believe that something is better than nothing. That mindset is dangerous because it makes you vulnerable to accepting unfavorable conditions out of fear of rejection or conflict. For example, if you're negotiating your salary and you know your absolute minimum is $2,000 per month, the amount you need to live with dignity and cover your obligations, you must have that figure clear and non-negotiable. Any offer below that should be declined or, at the very least, countered with additional benefits to make up the difference. Creating a winning negotiation plan means considering multiple scenarios. It's not just about having a plan A and plan B. It's about mapping out a spectrum of possibilities. What will you do if the other party offers exactly what you asked for? What will you say if they offer less than you expected? What if unexpected variables arise, such as a competitor entering the picture? Mentally rehearsing these scenarios reduces stress during the real negotiation and allows you to respond with calm and confidence instead of improvising under pressure. For example, if you're negotiating with a key supplier, you might have a backup argument ready. We understand your proposal is slightly above our budget, but we're considering a long-term contract that could mean higher volume for you. What options can we explore to meet in the middle? This kind of preparation gives you control and prevents silence or surprise from working against you. Another key element of preparation is having solid, verifiable information. Nothing weakens your position faster than making unsupported claims. If you say, the market is offering better prices, and you can't back it up, you lose credibility instantly. On the other hand, if you can show market studies, concrete references, or even real-life examples, your position carries weight. In negotiation, information is not only power, it's also trust. People tend to yield when they sense the other person knows what they're talking about and is well prepared. Let's look at a practical example. Someone wants to renegotiate their bank debt because they're going through a rough patch. If they arrive unprepared, they'll likely accept any repayment plan the bank proposes, even if it's burdensome. But if they first research average interest rates, review their payment history, identify existing support programs, and even prepare a personal budget to demonstrate repayment capacity, they can walk into the meeting with a strong case. I have data showing my rate is above the average, and I want to maintain my commitment. That's why I'm proposing this plan, which fits my situation and ensures you'll recover the money safely. That preparation can mean the difference between walking away with a fair solution or getting trapped in an agreement that creates more problems. Ultimately, preparing more than you think you need isn't just about gathering data and strategies. It's about mindset. It's training yourself to walk in with confidence, knowing you have options and clarity. It's understanding that every minute spent planning before a negotiation saves you hours of regret afterward. It's the difference between improvising and controlling the outcome. Rule number 2. Be the first to anchor the conversation. There is a very powerful psychological principle that few people take advantage of in negotiations. Being the first to talk about numbers, terms, or expectations. This is known as anchoring the conversation, and it consists of establishing an initial reference point that will influence how the other party perceives everything that follows. Many people are afraid to be the first to give a number or set conditions because they feel it exposes them, making them appear too ambitious or vulnerable. However, the reality is that whoever sets the first anchor usually controls the mental framework in which the entire negotiation develops. Imagine you are at a market and find an art piece you like, but there's no visible price tag. You approach the seller and ask how much it costs. If the seller says first, "This painting is worth $500, your mind immediately adjusts to that number as a reference point, even if you have no idea how much it should cost. You might negotiate, seek a discount, but you will do it around that $500 figure. Now imagine if you had spoken first, saying something like, "I'm looking for something in the $300 range." It's very likely that the final price will be much closer to your initial figure than to the seller's. This is the power of the anchor. It defines the playing field from the very beginning. But why does anchoring have such strong psychological power? The human mind seeks references to evaluate any situation. When we don't have a benchmark, the first piece of data we hear becomes that reference point, even if it's arbitrary. Studies show that, on average, the person who makes the first offer significantly influences the final outcome because it forces the other party to react within their framework instead of creating their own. That's why, instead of passively waiting to see what the other offers, it's best to enter with clarity and confidence to set your initial terms. Now, anchoring does not mean throwing out an unrealistic number or being aggressive. It means establishing a favorable range that gives you room to negotiate without seeming inflexible or dishonest. For example, if you are selling your car and its average market value is $12,000, you could start the conversation by saying, "I've seen vehicles with similar features listed between $12,500 and $13,000, and mine is in excellent condition." With this statement, you accomplish several things. You give a realistic range, justify your stance with external information, and position yourself slightly above the average to leave room for concessions without losing your desired goal. If, on the other hand, you simply said, "How much will you offer me?" you'd probably get a much lower number, and from there, you'd have to fight to regain lost ground. A common mistake is thinking that giving the first number puts you at a disadvantage because the other person might have offered more. And yes, that's possible, but in practice, when you anchor, you not only establish a range but also send a message of confidence and subject matter expertise. The other party perceives that you know your worth, have a clear expectation, and that your position is firm. Even if they were planning to offer more, your initial anchor can become the framework on which they adjust their proposal, and many times, this ends up working in your favor. Let's look at an example in the workplace. Suppose you've gone through several interviews, and it's time to discuss salary. Most candidates say, "I'm open to hearing your proposal," because they fear sounding demanding or risking the offer. However, if you come prepared with market research and experience in the role, you could say, "Based on my analysis of the salary range for this type of position in the market, I consider a fair salary to be between $2,800 and $3,200 per month." Immediately, the recruiter adjusts their expectations to that range, even if they originally planned to offer $2,500. You've placed an anchor that tilts the conversation in your favor. Anchoring is also useful when buying. Imagine you're looking for an apartment to rent. Instead of openly asking how much it costs, you could start with a reference. "I've seen similar apartments in this area between $900 and $1,000. What range is this one in?" This not only shows that you've done your research, but it forces the landlord to consider your reference point before giving theirs. If they were planning to ask for $1,050, they might now be more willing to adjust their offer toward the range you mentioned because you've psychologically brought them into your territory. There are cases where it might not be wise to anchor first, such as when you have very little information and the risk of giving a number that's too low or too high is significant. That's why the key to effective anchoring lies in preparation. Researching prices, market values, the other party's background, and their needs is essential for your anchor to have a solid foundation. An anchor without support can sound aggressive or unrealistic, which can close the conversation instead of opening it. For example, if you're negotiating with a supplier you know little about, throwing out a very low price might be seen as disrespectful, whereas a reasonable range backed by data keeps the conversation fluid and professional. Another powerful anchoring technique is to use ranges instead of single numbers. Saying, "We could be comfortable in a range between $15,000 and $16,500, offers flexibility and gives the other party room to feel they have room to negotiate. Well-constructed ranges often end up skewing the result toward the end that benefits you. For example, if you say $15,000 to $16,500, the final agreement is likely to be around $16,000, which may have been your initial goal. On the other hand, if you only say $16,500, you may generate resistance or an immediate rejection. Let's also think about the emotional side of anchoring. By setting a number or condition first, you not only set the course of the conversation, you also demonstrate leadership. It's like taking the helm of a ship. The other party tends to follow because they perceive you know where you're going. This doesn't mean you should always be rigid. In fact, the art lies in combining a strong anchor with a genuine willingness to listen, as this generates respect and collaboration instead of confrontation. Let's look at a more everyday example. A teenager wants to negotiate with their parents for a later curfew on the weekend. Instead of simply saying, "Can I stay out later?" they could anchor like this: "I've been coming home at 10 p.m. without any problems. How about we agree that on weekends I can come home at 11 p.m., as long as I give notice in advance and keep good grades?" Immediately, the conversation moves around that specific time, and if the parents negotiate, they'll likely end up at 10:30 or 10:45. Still an improvement for the teenager. If they hadn't set that initial anchor, the answer would probably have been a simple, "No, 10 o'clock is enough." In conclusion, anchoring first is not a sign of arrogance. It's a strategic move that sets the framework for the entire negotiation. It gives you psychological control, shows preparation, and creates a significant advantage, as long as it's done intelligently, backed by data, and with a collaborative tone. With practice, it becomes one of the most powerful tools any negotiator can use. Rule number 3. Use silence as your best weapon. Silence is one of the most powerful, and at the same time, most underestimated, tools in any negotiation. Many people feel a natural urge to fill every gap in the conversation, to respond immediately, to avoid letting the atmosphere become uncomfortable. However, that discomfort, when used wisely, can work in your favor in ways few people imagine. Silence is not the absence of action. It's a strategic resource that conveys confidence, forces the other person to think, and often pushes them to reveal information they had not planned to share. Imagine you're negotiating the purchase of a used car. The seller says, "The price is $15,000, but it's a bargain considering the condition of the vehicle." Most people's natural reaction would be to respond immediately with an argument. "That's too much, I can pay $13,000, or, could you lower it a bit more?" However, an experienced negotiator knows that silence has a powerful psychological effect. If you simply look at the seller calmly, maybe nodding slightly, but saying nothing, the silence becomes uncomfortable for them. That discomfort often leads them to justify their price or even offer a discount without you asking, "Well, we could let it go for $14,500 if you're willing to close today." What happened there wasn't magic. It was the power of silence. The awkward pause works because it breaks the expected pattern. People expect an immediate answer, whether acceptance or rejection. When they don't get one, they feel the burden of the conversation on their shoulders. In that space, many feel the need to explain more, clarify weak points in their offer, or even make concessions just to get the other person to say something. It's a natural reaction of the human brain to the void in interaction. Fill the space with more information. And that extra information can become the key to getting better terms in the agreement. This doesn't mean you should remain silent in a rigid or defiant way. The correct use of silence involves body language and a genuine listening attitude. If your silence comes with a hard stare, crossed arms, and a frown, you'll seem hostile and generate resistance. On the other hand, if it comes with a relaxed posture, calm eye contact, and a slight nod, the message you send is, "I'm thinking, I'm considering what you're saying." That difference is key for silence to be interpreted not as an attack, but as a moment for reflection. Silence is also useful when the other party makes an ambiguous proposal or when you want them to reveal more than they planned. Suppose you're negotiating with a supplier and they say, "We could offer you a better price if you increase your purchase volume." Instead of immediately responding with direct questions, stay silent, keep an attentive expression, and let the weight of their own statement push them to continue. Many times they'll say something like, "In fact, if you order 20% more, we can lower the rate by 10% and offer better payment terms." That extra information can be decisive, and you got it without pressing or asking a single question. In the workplace, silence can help you in salary or working condition discussions. Imagine your boss offers you a raise smaller than expected. "We can increase your salary by 3% this year." Instead of replying immediately with a "thank you" or a complaint, stay silent for a few seconds, showing you are seriously evaluating the proposal. That pause may prompt your boss to justify the number or even adjust it on the spot. "Well, let me check if we can make it 4% or include an additional bonus." That difference, even if small, is earned through your ability not to rush into an answer. Another advantage of silence is that it helps you control your own emotions. Many negotiations get complicated because one side reacts impulsively to a proposal or comment. Silence acts as a natural break, giving you time to process the information and respond clearly. For example, if during a negotiation someone says, "That proposal is completely unrealistic," the common reaction would be to defend yourself immediately. "No, it's not unrealistic because..." But if instead you remain silent for a few seconds, breathe, and then calmly respond, "Which part do you consider unrealistic, specifically?" You turn a potential conflict into an opportunity to clarify points without entering a defensive dynamic. Strategic silence can also be used to signal that a proposal doesn't satisfy you, without having to say it explicitly. When someone makes a low offer, instead of rejecting it verbally, a prolonged pause with a slight expression of doubt is often enough. Many times, the other side will interpret your silence as dissatisfaction and adjust their proposal proactively, without you having to give extra arguments. It's an elegant resource that avoids direct confrontation. Of course, silence should not become an automatic habit at every moment of the negotiation. Its power lies in moderation. If you stay silent all the time, the other person may feel you're playing games or manipulating them, which can generate distrust. The ideal is to use it at key moments, after a proposal, after a revealing comment, or when you sense the other party has more information to offer. These strategic silences, combined with an open posture and a calm tone when you do speak, position you as someone confident and in control of the situation. A daily life example. A teenager asks for permission to go to a concert. The parents hesitate and say, "We're not sure it's a good idea." Instead of insisting with, "Please, it's important to me," or giving rushed explanations, they might respond with silence, looking at them attentively and letting the parents elaborate. "We're not sure. Well, if you go with your friends and promise to be back early, we might consider it." That shift in the conversation happens because silence gives the other side space to process and, often, reconsider. Finally, using silence as a weapon is not just about getting better terms in a negotiation, it's about projecting confidence. A negotiator who is not afraid of silence is perceived as someone secure, who thinks before speaking, and who doesn't need to convince with unnecessary words. In a world where most people talk too much, the one who knows when to remain quiet has a huge competitive advantage. Silence is like an invisible rope that, instead of pushing the other person, pulls them toward your position, making them move without you having to force them. Rule number 4. Give something small for free to trigger reciprocity. There is a psychological principle so powerful that it transcends cultures, religions, and eras: reciprocity. It is the natural tendency of people to somehow return what they receive. If someone buys you a coffee, you feel the urge to reciprocate, whether by paying for the next one, offering a favor, or at least expressing gratitude. This principle has been deeply studied in the fields of social psychology and behavioral sciences, and it has proven to be a decisive factor in how people make decisions. In a negotiation, understanding and applying this principle can change the course of outcomes in surprising ways. Giving something small for free does not mean losing or giving away too much. On the contrary, it's about offering a strategic gesture that naturally makes the other person want to reciprocate. It could be a small detail, an initial concession, or an added benefit that costs you very little but has significant perceived value for the other side. This simple move changes the negotiation dynamic because, psychologically, the other person feels indebted and seeks to balance the scales. A simple example can be seen in the world of sales. Imagine walking into a perfume store and, without having bought anything, being offered to try an exclusive scent, accompanied by a small free sample. That gesture triggers an internal mechanism. They gave me something without me asking. I should consider buying from them. This is not manipulation, but rather how our minds naturally respond to an unsolicited favor. Now, let's apply this principle to a complex negotiation. A supplier is discussing the price of a long-term contract with you. Before entering into tough details, you decide to offer an unexpected benefit, like free training on how to use your product. This gesture, which may cost you very little, generates goodwill and predisposes the other side to concede on other important points for you, such as price or payment terms. But what kind of small concessions generate the highest return? Not all free things have the same impact. Perceived value is more important than actual cost. For example, if you offer something easy for you to provide but highly beneficial for the other side, the effect is immediate. It could be priority delivery, access to exclusive information, extended technical support, or a symbolic gift with emotional weight. Think of a hotel that, when receiving a guest complaint, offers a free dessert and a personalized apology letter. The real cost of the dessert is minimal, but the emotional impact on the guest is huge, enough to turn a negative experience into a future recommendation. In business negotiations, this principle has resolved seemingly deadlocked situations. A real case occurred with a tech company trying to close a deal with an important client who was resisting due to price. After several failed attempts, they decided to offer, at no extra cost, a secondary software module that was usually charged separately, along with an initial free training plan. This value-add gesture tipped the balance, and the client not only accepted the deal but also expanded the order because they felt they were getting special treatment. For the company, the cost was minimal since the module was developed in-house and the training was already part of their support structure. The net benefit far exceeded the investment. Another example happens in workplace relationships. Suppose an employee is negotiating a flexible schedule. Instead of asking for all the benefits up front, they first offer something: "I'm willing to cover a difficult shift occasionally if we can adjust my schedule on some days." This initial offer creates a sense of balance in the employer. The employee is not only asking but also giving something of themselves. This dynamic makes the agreement easier because it is no longer perceived as a one-sided concession but as a fair exchange. The principle of reciprocity also works in informal contexts. A neighbor who helps you fix your bike without expecting anything in return will probably never have to ask you to help them trim their hedges. You'll naturally feel the urge to offer. In daily negotiations with family, friends, or colleagues, a small initial gesture can open doors. Giving a bit of your time, sharing valuable information, or showing flexibility on a minor point can lead the other person to be more open on more important matters. It's important to highlight that reciprocity must be genuine. If it is perceived as a forced or manipulative tactic, it can backfire. People have a very sensitive radar for detecting when someone gives something just to get something back immediately. That's why the key is to make your initial gesture seem sincere and not explicitly conditional. You give because you want to give, because you value the relationship, or because you want to build trust. Paradoxically, when the other person perceives this authenticity, their urge to reciprocate becomes even stronger. The timing of the gesture also matters. If you offer it too late, when the negotiation is already tense or deteriorated, it may come across as a desperate attempt to save the situation. On the other hand, if you do it at the beginning or at a strategic moment, it sends a clear message: I'm not here just to take advantage, I also want to add value. This shift in perception opens the door to more collaborative and less confrontational agreements. In some cultures, this principle is naturally integrated. For example, in many Asian cultures, before any formal negotiation begins, it is common to offer a small gift or gesture of hospitality. It could be tea, a symbolic present, or a prior favor. These gestures do not have high monetary value but create an atmosphere of trust that makes the conversation flow more smoothly. In the Western world, while the form may vary, the idea is the same: a small act of giving before asking. Of course, you must be careful not to give away concessions that are too large or irreversible at the start, as that could be interpreted as weakness. The secret lies in giving something that does not compromise your position, costs you little, but is of high value to the other party. For example, if you're a freelancer negotiating a project with a new client, you could offer a brief free audit of their current situation. This audit, which might take you an hour, showcases your expertise and builds trust, increasing the likelihood of securing the full contract. When you give something small for free, you not only activate the principle of reciprocity but also change the tone of the negotiation, from confrontation to collaboration. The other side stops seeing you as an adversary and starts seeing you as a partner seeking mutual benefit. That perception, in turn, opens more doors and yields better long-term results, because people remember who was willing to give first without asking for anything immediate in return. In a world where everyone seems focused on taking, those who dare to give strategically stand out, and in the end, they gain far more than they give. Rule number 5. Never show desperation or dependence. One of the most common mistakes that can ruin a negotiation is showing desperation or dependence. When the other party perceives that you need the deal more than they need to close it with you, your position is instantly weakened. It's almost a natural reflex. If someone seems desperate to get something, the perceived value of their offer decreases, and the power shifts to the other side of the table. That's why, in any negotiation, projecting confidence, even when you really need that deal, is essential for achieving a fair and favorable outcome. Projecting confidence does not mean being arrogant or excessively cold. It means showing certainty in your value, your proposal, and your willingness to walk away if the terms are not right. This attitude creates respect and prevents the other party from trying to take advantage of an apparent weakness. A very common example can be seen in the job market. A person urgently needs a job and, during the interview, reveals their desperation with phrases like, "I'll accept any salary, whatever you think is fair." While well-intentioned, that attitude sends the message that their time and skills have no clear value, and it often leads to lower offers than they truly deserve. So, how do you project confidence when inside you feel you really need that deal? The key lies in preparation and mindset. If you know your value, have defined your walkaway point, and are clear on what you can and cannot negotiate, you can remain calm even under pressure. Also, pay attention to your body language. Stand tall, keep your tone steady and measured, and avoid nervous gestures such as fidgeting or avoiding eye contact. Even a strategic pause before responding can communicate confidence. The way you present yourself can completely change the other party's perception. A powerful way to avoid showing dependence is to keep multiple options open. When you have only one alternative, your mind can shift into all or nothing mode, which is easy to detect. That's why, before an important negotiation, you should search for and develop other alternatives. What's known as your BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. For example, if you're negotiating the rent for an apartment, have at least 2 or 3 other options in mind. This way, if the landlord sees that you have alternatives, they'll know they can't pressure you with an excessive price or unfavorable terms. Even if you don't explicitly mention those alternatives, your confidence and willingness to walk away will speak for you. The same applies in sales. A salesperson who depends too much on closing a single deal radiates anxiety. This is reflected in phrases like, "Please consider buying today, I really need to meet my quota," or in excessive persistence. In contrast, a salesperson with multiple prospects and open opportunities communicates differently, calmly, listening to the customer's needs, and presenting solutions without pressure. This attitude not only builds trust but paradoxically increases the likelihood of closing the sale, because nobody wants to do business with someone who appears desperate. There's also a psychological component you can use to your advantage. The psychology of scarcity. People value more what they perceive as limited or hard to obtain. This doesn't mean lying, but subtly communicating that your time, product, or proposal has special value and won't be available indefinitely. For example, an independent consultant might say, "I currently have space for one more client this quarter. I'd like you to consider it." This statement is neither aggressive nor false. It simply establishes that their time is valuable and limited, which elevates the perceived value. The psychology of scarcity is clearly seen in e-commerce, where phrases like "last units available" or "limited time offer" boost sales. In a face-to-face negotiation, the equivalent might be setting clear deadlines or emphasizing that your offer includes elements that won't always be available. Combined with a confident attitude, this sends a powerful message. I'm here because I want to reach an agreement, but I don't depend on it to exist. A practical example of this happened with a professional negotiating their salary at a tech company. They needed the job, but had prepared alternatives, another interview scheduled and contact with a recruiting firm. During salary negotiations, instead of immediately accepting the first offer, they listened, stayed silent for a few seconds, applying the previous rule, and then said, "I really appreciate the offer, but based on my research and other opportunities I'm considering, I believe a fair range would be between $4,000 and $4,500 per month." The company sensed that they weren't desperate, that they had options, and eventually increased the offer to secure them. Had they shown dependence, they likely would have accepted a lower salary. Another example comes from personal situations. Imagine someone wants to buy a used car directly from a private seller. The buyer has a tight budget and fears losing the chance because they really need the car. If they arrive saying, "Please don't sell it to someone else, I really need this car," the seller will sense power and be less flexible on price. Instead, if the buyer shows interest but remains calm, "I like the car, but I'm evaluating a couple of similar options. What's your best price?" The dynamic changes. The perception of multiple alternatives strengthens their position, even if in reality they only had one viable choice. Avoiding the display of desperation also requires emotional control. Many times, when we urgently want something, our body gives us away. Nervous movements, speaking too quickly, or over-justifying our position. A useful technique is to practice your tone and posture beforehand, either in front of a mirror or with someone you trust. Emotional preparation helps you project confidence, even in high-pressure situations. Finally, remember that not depending on a specific deal doesn't mean you don't care about the outcome. It means you value your time and your offer enough to walk away if it's not fair. Far from closing doors, this attitude earns you respect. The other party feels they are dealing with a professional or a self-assured person, and that changes the entire dynamic. In short, never show desperation or dependence, even when you feel it inside. Keep your options open, watch your body language, apply the psychology of scarcity, and remember that your value is not defined by a single deal. This mindset will not only help you close better agreements, but also strengthen your confidence and allow you to negotiate from a position of respect and balance, something that always delivers better long-term results. Rule number 6. Learn to listen between the lines. Listening seems like something basic, so common in daily life that we rarely stop to reflect on its true power in a negotiation. Most people believe listening simply means waiting for the other person to finish speaking so they can respond. But effective listening, listening between the lines, goes far beyond the words that are spoken. It means catching nuances in tone of voice, in the emotions hidden behind each phrase, in body language, and most importantly, in what is left unsaid. Those who master this skill gain valuable information that gives them a significant advantage in any negotiation. Often, the most important information is not in the literal content of the words, but in how they are said and what is omitted. Imagine you're negotiating with a supplier who says, "We might be able to adjust the price a little, but it would be complicated." If you focus only on the words, you might fixate on "it would be complicated" and assume there's no room to maneuver. But if you pay attention to their tone of voice, pauses, and facial expressions, you might detect discomfort or hesitation, signals that there is wiggle room, but they're reluctant to give it up easily. That information allows you to adjust your strategy and press at the right point. Listening between the lines also means detecting emotions. A person might say, "No problem," with a smile, but in a tense tone that reveals the opposite. This difference is critical because it allows you to anticipate potential objections or resistance before they become explicit. If you sense that behind an apparent acceptance there's insecurity or annoyance, you can ask open-ended questions to clarify, "I sense you're hesitating a bit. Is there something about this proposal that concerns you?" This type of observation shows empathy, reduces tension, and at the same time gives you more data to negotiate intelligently. Body language is an endless source of information. Crossing arms, avoiding eye contact, tapping a foot nervously, or frequently shifting posture can signal discomfort or resistance. On the other hand, an open posture, steady eye contact, and relaxed gestures signal readiness and agreement. In a negotiation, these cues can help you know when to push, when to give a little, or when to remain silent and wait. For example, if you notice someone verbally agreeing with your point but their body language pulls back, there might be an unspoken factor at play. Detecting that gives you the chance to explore it. It seems something's not fully convincing you. Can you share what it is? Listening between the lines also helps uncover real motivations, which are often not expressed directly. A person may say their main concern is price, but their true motivation may be safety, reliability, or the prestige associated with your product or service. If you identify what truly drives the other side, you can tailor your proposal accordingly. For instance, a client pushing for a discount might not be seeking the lowest price possible, but rather the satisfaction of feeling they got a good deal. In that case, offering an additional benefit or extra value might be more effective than lowering the price. Active listening is the key tool for this. It's not just about hearing, it's about showing, through your body language and brief responses, that you are truly paying attention. Nodding, maintaining eye contact, using confirmation phrases like, "I understand," or "that's important to you," and asking follow-up questions send the message that you value the other person's perspective. This attitude, besides building trust, often opens the door for them to share more information than they originally intended. Each additional piece of information is another part of the puzzle that allows you to make strategic decisions. A clear example of listening between the lines happens in salary negotiations. Imagine an employer says, "This is the best salary we can offer at the moment." If you only listen to the literal meaning, you might think there's nothing left to negotiate. But if you notice they looked down, spoke with an insecure tone, or paused a long time before saying it, you might interpret that there could be flexibility in other areas, such as benefits, bonuses, or vacation time. A simple, "I understand the base salary has a limit, but is there a possibility to consider a performance bonus or remote work days?" can open opportunities you would otherwise miss. Listening between the lines also involves tolerating the other person's silence. Many people feel the need to fill every space with words, but if you learn to listen not only to what is said but to what is left unsaid, you can gain valuable insights. For example, when you ask, "What's the biggest challenge you see with this proposal?" and the other person takes several seconds to respond, that pause tells you something. They are likely evaluating how to express a real concern or point of resistance. If you respect that silence and wait, there's a high chance they will reveal valuable information, more than if you interrupted with another question. Another common situation where listening between the lines makes a difference is when negotiating with clients who don't express their real objections. Sometimes they say, "Let me think about it," when they really mean, "I'm not sure it's worth it." If you pay attention to tone and facial expression, you may detect that the real objection is a lack of confidence in the value of your offer. This lets you adapt your response. "It seems you need more clarity on how this can benefit you long-term," Would you like me to show you some similar cases where it worked well? That adjustment is only possible because you listened beyond the words. In short, listening between the lines is a blend of mindfulness, empathy, and strategic analysis. It lets you spot hidden opportunities, resolve objections before they become problems, and build a deeper connection with the other party. People want to feel heard and understood, and when they sense you truly pay attention to what they say and what they don't say, they are more likely to trust you and be willing to concede on important points. In a world where most people talk too much and listen too little, those who master active listening and can interpret nonverbal cues, emotions, and silences have a huge competitive advantage. They not only achieve better agreements, but also build stronger, longer-lasting relationships. Listening between the lines is, in essence, listening with your whole body and mind. And that is one of the most valuable skills any negotiator can have. Rule number 7. Build relationships, not just deals. Most people approach a negotiation with a short-term mindset, I want to win this deal today, here and now. That mindset isn't necessarily wrong, but it is limited. In reality, the most successful negotiations are not focused solely on closing a one-time deal, but on building lasting relationships. A good relationship generates trust, opens doors to future opportunities, and in many cases, produces benefits that far outweigh the immediate results of a single agreement. Negotiating with long-term relationships in mind is not just an act of goodwill, it's a high-impact strategy. When you focus only on the current deal, there's a risk of adopting aggressive or manipulative tactics which, while they might give you a momentary win, can damage the relationship and close off future possibilities. For example, a salesperson who manages to impose a high price through pressure and psychological tricks may win that contract, but it's highly likely the client won't return, will speak poorly of them, or will actively seek alternatives to never work with them again. In contrast, a salesperson who negotiates with mutual benefit in mind and works to build trust may not achieve the highest margin in the first deal, but over time will gain loyal customers, referrals, and a reputation that multiplies their value. The power of empathy is key to building these relationships. Empathy doesn't mean giving in to everything, but genuinely understanding what the other party needs, feels, and values. When someone feels understood, they're far more likely to trust you and be open to agreements that benefit both sides. A clear example happens in workplace negotiations. An employer who understands that an employee values flexible hours more than an immediate pay raise can design a benefits package that meets that need without excessively raising costs. In turn, the employee feels their well-being matters and responds with greater commitment and loyalty. Trust is built through consistent actions. It's not enough to say, you can trust me. You have to prove it by keeping your promises, honoring your word, and being transparent when difficulties arise. In a negotiation, this means being clear about your limits, admitting when something can't be done, and avoiding deceptive tactics. For example, if you promise a delivery date you know you can't meet just to close the deal, you might win that contract, but you'll lose the relationship when the promise is broken. On the other hand, if you're honest from the start, we can deliver in 3 weeks, no sooner, but we guarantee quality. The other party may value your candor and choose to keep working with you, even if the time frame wasn't ideal. There are concrete strategies for creating win-win relationships. One is to always look for an area of common interest beyond the immediate deal. For example, if you're negotiating with a supplier, you might take interest in their processes, challenges, and long-term plans. That genuine interest can lead to solutions that benefit both sides, such as a longer-term contract with stable pricing that gives the supplier security and improves your costs. Another strategy is to maintain contact and communication even outside of negotiation moments. A simple message to check in on a project, share a relevant article, or congratulate them on an achievement creates a more human connection that, when it's time for a new negotiation, makes the other party more willing to collaborate. In practice, building relationships means prioritizing reputation over immediate gain. This is especially important in environments where parties meet repeatedly, such as business communities, specific industries, or inter-company relationships. A classic example is that of an entrepreneur who, in their first negotiations with distributors, opts for smaller margins but guarantees exceptional service and fair treatment. Over time, those distributors become loyal partners who offer preferential access to opportunities, better terms, and referrals to new business. The relationship built ends up being worth far more than the money that could have been earned by squeezing the first deal. Of course, building relationships doesn't mean allowing abuse or abandoning your goals. It means having a collaborative mindset. How can we both benefit from this interaction? This involves active listening, being flexible on less critical points, and seeking creative solutions when disagreements arise. For example, in a contract negotiation where price is a sticking point, instead of insisting on lowering or raising the final number, you can explore other forms of value. Payment terms, minimum quantities, extended warranties, additional services. Many times, the agreement that satisfies both parties comes from looking beyond price and focusing on the relationship as a whole. There's a fundamental principle that sums this up. People do business with those they know, like, and trust. If you become someone who inspires trust, listens, and cares about the other party's success, you'll have more negotiation opportunities, better terms, and relationships that go beyond the short term. Even in situations where no immediate agreement is reached, leaving a good impression can pay off later. That person might recommend you to others, come back when they have more budget, or invite you to participate in another project. A real example of how a relationship can outweigh a single deal happened with a small graphic design firm. In an initial negotiation with a large client, the firm decided to adjust its price to support a pilot project, committing to maintain impeccable quality and delivery times. The client was satisfied and, from that experience, trusted the firm with all their future projects, generating revenue far greater than the initial contract. If the firm had pushed hard for immediate profit, it might have earned a little more that first month but would not have built a relationship that fueled its growth. Ultimately, negotiating with the relationship in mind means seeing the other party not just as an opponent at the table, but as a potential long-term ally. It's a mindset not everyone adopts because it requires patience and vision, but it's what sets the most successful negotiators apart. When you can make the other party not only accept a deal but also feel they can trust you and that working with you is a positive experience, your influence and your ability to create opportunities grow exponentially. Rule number 8. Control your emotions and read those of others. Emotions are one of the most decisive factors in any negotiation. No matter how well prepared you are or how solid your strategy is, if you lose emotional control at a critical moment, you can make impulsive decisions that severely affect the outcome. On the other hand, knowing how to read the other party's emotions gives you an additional advantage, as it allows you to understand their state of mind, anticipate their moves, and adapt your behavior strategically. Negotiating is not a purely rational exercise. It is, above all, a human encounter where emotions such as fear, frustration, enthusiasm, or anger are present in every word, gesture, and silence. Staying cool under pressure does not mean being indifferent or insensitive. It means maintaining an emotional balance that allows you to think clearly even in tense situations. Pressure can come from many sources. The urgency to close the deal, the other side's aggressive attitude, the feeling that you have much to lose, or simply the sensation of being watched and judged. The key is to recognize your emotions without letting them control you. For example, if you feel the conversation turning hostile and notice anger rising inside you, the first step is to acknowledge that feeling before it turns into a sharp tone or an impulsive response. There are very effective emotional self-control techniques. One of the simplest and most powerful is conscious breathing. Pausing, inhaling deeply, and exhaling slowly may seem insignificant, but physiologically it lowers your heart rate, relaxes your body, and clears your mind. Another technique is the use of strategic pauses. When you receive a provocative proposal or an unfair criticism, instead of responding immediately, remaining silent for a few seconds allows you to think and prevents emotional reactions you may regret. In many cases, that brief silence not only helps you control yourself but also makes the other party uncomfortable, prompting them to reveal more information or even soften their stance. Emotional regulation also involves mental preparation before entering the negotiation. Visualizing possible scenarios, including the most difficult ones, and rehearsing how you would respond can help you avoid being caught off guard. If you know the other negotiator is aggressive or uses manipulation tactics, prepare neutral phrases and firm postures that allow you to remain calm. For example, when faced with a comment like, "If you don't accept this now, you'll miss the opportunity," you could respond calmly, "I appreciate your perspective, but I need to review all the elements before making a decision." This neutral answer avoids escalating the conflict and keeps you in control. Being able to read other people's emotions is the other side of the coin. Observing nonverbal cues, such as tone of voice, speaking speed, facial expressions, or body posture, can reveal much more than words. A negotiator who crosses their arms tightly, presses their lips together, and avoids eye contact is likely angry or defensive. Someone who leans forward, speaks faster, and raises their tone may be nervous or anxious to close the deal. Detecting these emotional states gives you clues on how to steer the conversation. If you sense anger, you can slow the pace and use a calm tone. If you sense anxiety, you can offer additional information or reassurance to reduce that tension. Handling aggressive or manipulative negotiators requires special attention. Some people adopt hostile tactics, raising their voice, constantly interrupting, or trying to make you feel inferior to dominate the conversation. The worst possible reaction is to respond with the same aggression, as this escalates the conflict and reduces the chances of reaching a beneficial agreement. Instead, maintain composure and use assertive communication techniques. One effective strategy is to acknowledge the emotion without surrendering control. I understand that this topic causes concern. Let's see how we can find common ground. This response doesn't ignore the conflict, but doesn't fuel it either. Another tactic used by manipulative negotiators is employing guilt or fear. Phrases like, "If you don't sign this today, you'll lose a great opportunity," or "You're putting us in a very difficult position," are designed to create emotional pressure. When faced with these tactics, the key is to remember your preparation, your objectives, and your walkaway point. Repeat to yourself that you have the right to take the time you need and that no opportunity is worth losing control or accepting unfair terms. You can even verbalize it calmly. "I appreciate your proposal, but I need to ensure it benefits both parties. I cannot make a decision under pressure." Emotions can also be a tool in your favor if used wisely. Showing genuine enthusiasm when there is progress creates a positive atmosphere. Showing controlled disappointment at an unfair proposal can lead the other party to reconsider. However, this must be done subtly and honestly, because if the other side senses emotional manipulation, you will lose credibility. The key is to use your emotional expression strategically, not reactively. There's a very illustrative example from the business world. An entrepreneur was negotiating with an investor known for his aggressive style. During the meeting, the investor constantly interrupted, criticized every point of the business plan, and made disparaging remarks. Instead of responding with anger or desperation, the entrepreneur maintained a calm tone, took notes on each observation, and replied with objective data, avoiding personal confrontations. In the end, that firm but controlled attitude changed the dynamic. The investor reduced his aggression, and the negotiation ended with a fair agreement. The entrepreneur's self-control not only saved the negotiation but also earned him respect and credibility. Controlling your emotions and reading those of others is not something you achieve overnight, but it is a skill that improves with practice. The more aware you are of your own emotional state and of other signals, the better prepared you are to handle difficult situations with calm and precision. This ability not only improves your negotiation results but also strengthens your reputation as a trustworthy and professional person. Ultimately, a negotiation is not just an exchange of information and terms, it is an exchange of emotions. Learning to stay calm, regulate your emotional responses, and detect what the other person feels without them saying it makes you a much more effective negotiator. The ability to keep your cool when others lose theirs, and to understand what others feel without being told, is as powerful a competitive advantage as any technical strategy. Rule number 9. Use the power of alternatives, BATNA. One of the most powerful concepts in the world of negotiation is the BATNA, which stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. In simple terms, your BATNA is the strongest option you have if the current negotiation does not reach a successful conclusion. Understanding your BATNA and actively working to strengthen it before sitting down to negotiate can be the difference between being at the mercy of the other party or having full control over your decisions. Without a clear BATNA, you may feel pressured to accept unfavorable terms. With a solid BATNA, you enter the table with confidence and real power. Why does your BATNA determine your negotiating strength? Because it gives you the ability to walk away without fear. Imagine you are negotiating the rent for an apartment, and it's the only option you have. If the landlord senses you are desperate and have no other alternatives, they hold a significant advantage over you and will likely refuse to budge on price or terms. In contrast, if you visited 3 other apartments before negotiating, got quotes, and have at least one other acceptable offer, you can negotiate from a position of security. Even if the other party tries to pressure you, you can calmly assess, if this doesn't work out, I have another option. This simple fact changes the entire dynamic. Creating and improving your alternatives before any negotiation is essential groundwork. Whether you're negotiating a multimillion-dollar contract, a salary, or the price of a car, you can always invest time in exploring options. For example, if you plan to ask for a raise, research the salary range for your position in the market, look for similar job offers, update your portfolio, and expand your professional network. If the raise isn't granted, having an alternative, like another interview scheduled, prevents you from feeling your future depends solely on one answer. In business, large companies allocate entire teams to analyze alternative suppliers, additional markets, or new partners, precisely because they know their bargaining power increases in proportion to the number and quality of their alternatives. Improving your alternatives doesn't always mean having an option ready to execute immediately. It means designing scenarios that give you room to maneuver. For example, an entrepreneur negotiating with an investor might prepare several alternatives: bank financing, smaller-scale self-funding, or strategic alliances. These options don't need to be perfect, but their mere existence reduces emotional pressure and allows you to negotiate with greater clarity. Even if you never use them, just knowing they are there changes your posture, your tone of voice, and the confidence with which you communicate, elements the other party notices immediately. That said, using your options doesn't mean flaunting them or coming across as arrogant. Saying in a smug tone, "I have other offers, so you'd better improve yours," is a sure way to create resistance or even shut the door entirely. The key is to communicate your BATNA subtly and professionally. Instead of making a direct threat, you could say, "I really appreciate your proposal. I'm evaluating a couple of additional options, but I'm interested in seeing how we can make this work for both of us." This phrasing communicates that you have alternatives while keeping the door open for genuine collaboration. Remember, the goal is not to humiliate the other party, but to strengthen your position while building the relationship. Real cases illustrate the power of BATNA. A young professional was negotiating his first job. The company offered a salary below the market average, arguing it was a great learning opportunity. Instead of accepting immediately out of fear of losing the chance, he had prepared a BATNA, a similar offer from another company with a slightly higher salary. During the negotiation, he calmly said, "I appreciate the offer, but I'm considering another proposal that better aligns with my salary expectations. Is there any flexibility to move closer to that range?" The company, realizing he didn't depend solely on them, increased their offer. His BATNA gave him power and prevented him from falling into the trap of accepting inferior conditions. Another example can be seen in real estate transactions. A buyer with only one property option often ends up conceding on price, fees, or timelines. On the other hand, a buyer with 3 real alternatives can negotiate calmly. If a seller says, "This is the price, take it or leave it," a buyer with a BATNA can respond, "I understand, though I have other options that fit my budget. If there's room to discuss, I'd love to find a middle ground." This stance is not confrontational but makes it clear they are not trapped, often motivating the seller to be more flexible to avoid losing the deal. It's important to note that your BATNA can also evolve during the negotiation. Sometimes, the process reveals new options you didn't have at the start. That's why it's vital to keep an open mind and continue exploring alternatives even while you negotiate. You may uncover unexpected advantages. Likewise, it's essential to assess the other party's BATNA. If they lack good alternatives, that gives you more leverage. If they have multiple strong options, you will need to strengthen your proposal and highlight your unique value. The power of alternatives lies not only in having them but in the mental security they provide. When you know you have options, your language changes. Your gestures convey confidence, your voice becomes calmer, and your ability to say no increases. Many negotiations fail not because the other side is smarter, but because one party enters with the mindset of, "I need this at all costs." That emotional state is noticeable and gives the other side an advantage. With a solid BATNA, you eliminate that vulnerability. In conclusion, BATNA is one of the pillars of effective negotiation. Identifying your best alternative, working to strengthen it before you sit at the table, and communicating it with tact puts you in a position of power, without threats or confrontations. When you enter a negotiation knowing you have options, everything changes. You negotiate with clarity, avoid desperation, and increase your chances of achieving a fair and favorable outcome. Rule number 10. Close with precision and without ambiguity. One of the most critical parts of any negotiation is the close. You may have prepared flawlessly, read the other party correctly, managed emotions, and presented a clear proposal, but if you fail at the close, all that effort can vanish. An almost yes is not an agreement. It's an illusion of progress that can cause you to lose time, money, and opportunities. That's why closing with precision and without ambiguity is a skill that sets successful negotiators apart from those who get stuck in vague commitments or empty promises. The goal is to turn a positive intention into a firm, documented commitment that gives both parties certainty and avoids misunderstandings. Turning an almost yes into a signed agreement requires recognizing that many people, out of politeness or discomfort, avoid saying no directly. In a meeting, you might hear phrases like, "sounds good," "we could consider that," or "let me think about it." And if you're not paying attention, you could interpret these responses as agreements when they are not. To avoid this, it's essential to use clear, direct closing questions. Can we then confirm that we will move forward with this proposal? Or are you ready for us to formalize the agreement today? These questions create a decision point that forces the other party to define their real position. It's also important to eliminate any ambiguity. A verbal agreement without concrete details is fertile ground for future conflict. For example, if you close a service negotiation without specifying delivery dates, exact scope, and payment terms, it's likely that discrepancies will arise later. To prevent this, every key point should be documented. What exactly will be delivered? When? How will payments be handled? What happens if one party fails to meet their obligations? Documenting all this not only protects both parties but also sends a message of professionalism and seriousness. There are common mistakes many people make when closing deals that you should avoid. One is assuming the other party remembers all the points discussed in the same way you do. Memory is selective and often filtered by personal interests. Therefore, what you understood as a commitment may not be exactly what the other party understood. Another frequent mistake is rushing the close out of fear of losing the opportunity, which can lead to conceding on important points at the last moment. Imagine you've negotiated a contract with favorable terms, but at the end, out of fear of hearing, "I'll think about it," you accept lowering the price more than necessary or adding unfavorable clauses. The key is to remain calm and confirm each point before closing. Another common mistake is failing to detect signs of doubt at the moment of closing. Many times, the other party says yes, but with body language that reflects uncertainty, avoiding eye contact, crossing their arms, or responding in a weak tone of voice. These signals indicate that there may be a latent problem which, if not addressed, could cause the agreement to fall apart later. When faced with these signs, don't ignore the discomfort, address it with open questions. "It seems there's something you're unsure about. Would you like us to review any specific point before formalizing?" This attention to detail can save you from a false close and ensure the agreement is real and sustainable. Closing techniques also include handling last-minute objections. Many negotiations encounter what's known as final resistance, an obstacle that arises right before signing, a last-minute discount, an additional deadline, or a special condition. The key is to anticipate these possible requests and have your responses ready. If you already know your limits and alternatives, you can handle that resistance without losing control. For example, if someone asks for a last-minute discount, you can respond, "We can review that point, but I would need to also adjust the delivery date or scope to keep it viable." This technique shows willingness but maintains balance in the agreement. Any close should be followed by post-negotiation follow-up. Many people believe that once the contract is signed or the deal is agreed, the work is over. However, the true success of a negotiation is measured not only by closing the deal, but also by its fulfillment and the quality of the relationship afterwards. Follow-up means confirming that both parties understand exactly what was agreed, establishing a clear communication channel, and verifying the progress of commitments. A simple follow-up message, such as, "Thank you for your trust. Here's the document with all confirmed points and the agreed work schedule," builds trust and reduces the risk of non-compliance. Furthermore, follow-up is an opportunity to strengthen the relationship. Showing interest in ensuring the agreement is carried out correctly demonstrates professionalism and can open doors to future collaborations. For example, after closing a contract with a client, calling a few days later to make sure everything is going well, without waiting for them to reach out with a problem, creates a positive impression that can translate into new opportunities or referrals. There are real cases that prove how precise closing makes the difference. A technology company lost an important contract because the close was left up in the air with the phrase, "We'll get in touch next week to formalize." Their competitor, who did close with precision and signed an agreement the same day, secured the project. Conversely, another company in a similar sector won a $1 million contract because, after hearing, "Yes, it seems fine," the negotiator asked, "Would you like us to prepare the commitment document right now so we can move forward immediately?" That question prevented the decision from cooling off and sealed the deal. Ultimately, closing with precision and without ambiguity is not just about signing a piece of paper. It's about creating clarity, commitment, and trust. It means turning a verbal agreement into a concrete, documented plan that everyone can understand. It means taking the final step that transforms a productive conversation into a tangible result. And it also means taking the first step toward the success of the ongoing relationship, because a solid close is the foundation on which all future agreements are built. Rule number 11. Learn to say no with grace. Saying no is one of the most difficult, and at the same time, most powerful skills in any negotiation. Many people fear rejecting an offer out of concern for losing the relationship, the opportunity, or creating a bad impression. However, accepting everything just to avoid discomfort can lead you to unfavorable agreements, commitments you can't fulfill, or unbalanced relationships. Learning to say no with grace allows you to protect your interests without closing doors, without creating resentment, and, in many cases, turning rejection into an opportunity for future collaboration. Knowing when to reject an offer is just as important as knowing when to accept one. Not every proposal deserves a yes, even if it looks attractive at first glance. Some offers might sound good but aren't aligned with your goals, exceed your capabilities, or bring more risk than reward. For example, a freelancer might be offered a large project that promises a lot of money but comes with impossible deadlines and unreasonable conditions. Accepting it could put their reputation and well-being at risk. In such cases, no is not just an option, it's a smart strategy that protects your time, energy, and credibility. Declining with grace means taking care with how you communicate your decision. It's not about slamming the door or over-explaining, but rather delivering your refusal clearly, respectfully, and strategically. There are useful phrases and techniques for doing this. One is the positive no. Instead of simply saying, "I can't," you add a reason and a show of appreciation. For example, "I truly appreciate the proposal, but at this moment I can't commit to those deadlines without compromising the quality I deliver. I'd love for us to find another way to collaborate in the future." This approach avoids sounding abrupt and leaves the door open for future opportunities. Another technique is to offer an alternative when you say no. This isn't always possible, but when it is, it shows willingness and builds goodwill. For example, if a potential client asks for a discount you can't accept, you might respond, "With that budget, I can't offer the full package, but I can design an adjusted version that meets the main objectives." Or, if you truly can't participate in a project, you could recommend another trusted professional or company. This way, even though you're saying no, you're still providing value and maintaining a positive relationship. Body language and tone of voice also matter. A hesitant no, with an evasive gaze or an overly apologetic tone, can create confusion or invite further pressure. In contrast, a firm no, delivered with eye contact and a calm tone, communicates clarity and confidence without aggression. For example, if someone insists on conditions you can't accept, you might say with a steady voice and open posture, "I understand and value your position, but under those conditions I can't move forward. I'm confident we can find another way to work together in the future." A common mistake when saying no is giving overly long explanations or making up weak excuses. This can damage your credibility and invite more attempts to persuade you. Instead, keep your message short, honest, and future-focused. Saying no with grace also means listening to the other party's reaction and showing empathy. Phrases like, "I understand this might be frustrating," and "I truly value your time and interest," can soften the impact of rejection and convey respect. Often, a well-communicated no can turn into a future opportunity. For example, a company that declines a contract because it doesn't align with its strategy might remain in a strong position to collaborate later when a better fit project arises. This happens because the rejection is delivered respectfully and professionally, which builds trust in the seriousness and clarity of your judgment. In fact, there are cases where saying no earns more respect than a hesitant yes. A person who knows how to set boundaries is perceived as confident and professional, qualities highly valued in business. A good example comes from the world of strategic partnerships. A tech startup was invited to join an alliance with a much larger company, but the proposal required them to give up an excessive share of control over their product. The team decided to decline, explaining respectfully that they wanted to maintain the independence of their technology, while expressing interest in exploring other forms of collaboration in the future. A year later, the larger company came back with a far more balanced proposal, precisely because they respected the clarity and firmness with which the startup said no the first time. Saying no is also a tool for managing time and avoiding overload. Many people accept projects or agreements out of fear of missing out, only to end up overworked, stressed, and producing mediocre results. A well-placed no protects your quality of life and allows you to focus on what truly matters. This applies in personal life as well. Saying no to family or social commitments you can't handle properly doesn't make you insensitive. It makes you someone who manages their time responsibly. In conclusion, learning to say no with grace is a key skill that protects your interests, enhances your reputation, and opens the door to future opportunities. It's not about rejecting for the sake of rejecting, but about communicating boundaries with respect, clarity, and long-term vision. Every time you say no strategically, you strengthen your ability to make conscious decisions and position yourself as someone trustworthy, discerning, and clear about their goals. An indiscriminate yes can jeopardize your future. A well-communicated no can help build it. Rule number 12. Negotiate as a lifestyle. Negotiation is not just a skill you activate in a formal meeting, in a boardroom, or during a major business transaction. Negotiating is a lifestyle, a mindset that accompanies you in every interaction, every conversation, and every opportunity to reach an agreement. The difference between someone who negotiates occasionally and a master negotiator lies in how they perceive the world. While some see negotiations as isolated events, others understand that every interaction can be an opportunity to create value, influence outcomes, and build relationships. This mindset doesn't develop overnight. It is built through consistent practice, observing patterns, and applying principles in everyday situations. The master negotiator's mindset rests on 3 pillars: awareness, flexibility, and confidence. Awareness means recognizing that there is always something at stake, even if it's small. For example, when you decide what movie to watch with your partner, you're negotiating. When you set bedtime with your children, you're negotiating. Even when you convince a group of friends to choose a certain restaurant, you're practicing. Flexibility means understanding that every situation is different and requires a unique approach. Not every negotiation is won by imposing conditions. Some are achieved by listening more, others by finding creative solutions, and many by conceding on small matters to win on what truly matters. Lastly, confidence comes from practice. The more situations you face, the more comfortable you become managing different personalities and contexts. Practicing negotiation in everyday situations is one of the most effective ways to improve. You don't need to wait for a high-stakes deal to train. You can do it daily. For example, while shopping, you can practice the art of asking open-ended questions, exploring alternatives, and observing how the salesperson reacts to different approaches. At work, you can negotiate priorities with your team, delivery deadlines with your superiors, or additional resources for your projects. Even in transit, when a misunderstanding arises about a fare or a route, you have an opportunity to apply assertive communication techniques, listen to the other side, and find a balanced solution. Each small experience strengthens your ability to adapt, remain calm, and identify common ground. Adopting negotiation as a lifestyle also makes you a persuasive leader. A good negotiator not only seeks what they want but also inspires others to collaborate and find mutually beneficial solutions. This type of leadership is seen in people who can motivate their team, handle conflicts calmly, and inspire trust in any environment. Persuasion is not about manipulation. It's about communicating clearly, listening actively, and showing empathy. For example, a leader who needs their team to work extra hours doesn't impose the decision coldly but explains the importance of the goal, listens to concerns, and finds ways to compensate for the extra effort. This ability to influence positively fosters loyalty and commitment. Over time, living negotiation as a lifestyle develops a type of confidence that's hard to break. You no longer fear difficult conversations because you know there are always options, always room to explore common ground, and you always have the ability to stand firm without damaging the relationship. People notice this confidence, and it changes how they perceive you. When you project security, others are less likely to take advantage of you. When they see you can listen and find solutions, they become more willing to collaborate. A practical example of how daily negotiation can change your life is found in personal finance habits. Negotiating a better rate with your phone company, looking for alternative insurance options, or even speaking with your bank to improve loan terms. These small adjustments, which may seem trivial, can lead to substantial savings over time. More importantly, they develop the mindset that nothing is entirely fixed and that there's always room for improvement if you know how to ask and frame your proposal effectively. Negotiation as a lifestyle also affects how you handle personal conflicts. Instead of reacting with anger or resignation when disagreements arise, you start to see them as opportunities to better understand the other person and find a middle ground. For example, rather than arguing with a neighbor about noise, you can apply negotiation techniques. Listen to their perspective, calmly express your discomfort, and work together to find a solution, such as agreeing on quiet hours or using soundproofing solutions. This approach prevents destructive confrontations and fosters mutual respect. The path to becoming a master negotiator is not about memorizing perfect lines or complex techniques, but about integrating basic principles into your daily life. It means listening more than you speak, preparing even for small situations, regulating your emotions, keeping your focus on long-term relationships, and never fearing to set limits with a well-delivered no. When these principles become habits, you no longer need to think too much about applying them. They become a natural part of how you interact with the world. Ultimately, negotiating as a lifestyle turns you into someone who not only achieves better results at work or in business, but also lives with fewer conflicts, more options, and greater control over your decisions. You become a persuasive and confident leader not because you impose your will, but because you understand people, know how to communicate your interests, and build solutions where others only see problems. And perhaps most importantly, you discover that negotiation is not an act of confrontation, but an ongoing act of collaboration to create a world where everyone can win. Conclusion: your new negotiator mindset. Negotiating is not a skill reserved for a select few. It is a way of thinking and living that completely changes how you approach every situation in your life. A negotiator mindset means leaving nothing to chance, never entering an important conversation unprepared, and never accepting conditions you know are wrong just because you fear losing. It means that from now on, every interaction is an opportunity to create smarter agreements, stronger relationships, and more balanced outcomes. This mindset doesn't switch on only during a contract signing or a big transaction, but in everyday life. In how you speak with your boss, in how you set boundaries with clients, in how you reach agreements with your family, and even in how you negotiate with yourself when making difficult daily decisions. A new negotiator mindset isn't built on quick tricks, but on principles that become habits. It means entering each negotiation with clarity about what you want, with solid alternatives that give you power, with the ability to listen beyond the words, and with the skill to communicate calmly and firmly, even under pressure. It also means understanding that each agreement is not an isolated event, but part of a long-term relationship where your reputation as someone reliable, fair, and firm is built with every word and every action. From now on, every time you feel pressured to give up too much, remember that power doesn't come from imposing yourself or avoiding conflict, but from your preparation and your ability to find solutions that work for both parties. Every time you face a no from the other side, remember it's not the end, but an opportunity to explore, ask more questions, and discover what lies behind that resistance. Every time someone tries to force you into an urgent decision, remember your right to pause, evaluate, and respond with strategy, not emotion. Being an unstoppable negotiator is not about winning every time or always achieving the perfect outcome. It's about becoming someone who never feels lost because you know there are always options, always room to maneuver, and always opportunities to improve the result. It's that quiet confidence that transforms your body language, your tone of voice, and the way others perceive you. Over time, that confidence becomes respect and influence, because people recognize you as someone who can handle complex situations with intelligence and calm. The next step is deliberate practice. Don't wait for a big negotiation to apply this mindset. Start today with something simple. Negotiate a more realistic delivery date, ask for clarity in a vague commitment, propose an improvement in an informal agreement you have with someone close to you. Every small exercise strengthens your confidence and your ability to adapt. Every interaction becomes training for the bigger challenges that lie ahead. Over time, you'll discover that your life changes because you no longer react out of urgency or fear, but from clarity and strategy. You stop accepting whatever is offered out of fear of losing and start building results that truly move you toward your goals. You become someone who inspires trust, because your way of negotiating demonstrates confidence, respect, and a commitment to mutual value. That is the true essence of being an unstoppable negotiator. Not the ability to manipulate or always win, but the ability to create realities where everyone moves forward, and to do so consistently, regardless of the context or difficulty. Your new negotiator mindset is not limited to a technique. It defines your identity. From now on, every conversation will be an opportunity to practice, every disagreement will be an opportunity to learn, and every agreement will be an opportunity to build stronger relationships and fairer results. That is the true power of negotiation. Not just changing one specific situation, but changing the way you live and make decisions every single day. So, if this audiobook has inspired you and you're ready to keep diving deeper into your personal growth and inner transformation, I invite you to discover another revealing audiobook that will change the way you see the world, your decisions, and your potential. Click now, and I'll see you there.